And welcome to a new episode of A Dynasty Mind. My name is Chris Chung. You can find me on Twitter as FF Dynasty 101. This is a feature of Fake Pigskin. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by DLF writer Adam Tzikas, Adam Z on Twitter. How are you doing, Adam?
I am awesome. Super excited to be here. Most people probably wouldn't know, but Chris and I have been in a league. I don't know. It's been like 4 years now, I think. I think
Yeah.
I joined in 2015. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. We've been so we were in this league that was my first ever Dynasty league that kept going throughout all the years, and I'm really excited to have you join in because you brought in a new energy, you brought in a new personality that really fit with our league, and Drew and Devin and all those people that have been on the show before, always we always have fun in this league.
Yep.
So yeah, tell us, Devin, Devin, tell us, Adam, how did you get started with Dynasty, and tell us a little bit about your background and how it led up to you being a writer for DLF.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story because I didn't really watch football until I got to college. So, basically, all through high school and stuff like that, I never really was into sports. And then I got to college and everyone was crazy about football. And then I just started, getting to college a little bit. And then I basically found the NFL and fell in love immediately. So, I played a little bit of fantasy football, like right in the beginning of college. And it just kind of it just blew up for me. I went from like one league to three leagues. Then I found Dynasty. And since then, I'm in like 20 leagues now, just because I love the sport so much. I love fantasy football. So yeah, I've been playing Dynasty basically probably about 5 years now. Fantasy football maybe like 8. Um, and I was the moderator. I just took over the moderation 1 year of the Dynasty fantasy football subreddit on Reddit. And that kind of led to me putting out articles, making content for the subreddit, and then DLF said they were looking for writers. And this was it's probably about 2.5, maybe almost 3 years now that I've been writing for DLF. It goes by so fast. But yeah, so, I kind of wasn't really into football and then kind of exploded into it. Now I can't get enough. It's really all I think about and all I talk about. So that's kind of my route.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, this is kind of like, as you talk about it, is very similar to the way I started. I didn't
Hmm.
get into football as well until college, and it just exploded from there. I couldn't get enough of it. As like, why is there an off season? Why is there only 4 months of football? I
Right.
can play fantasy, and then that led me to Dynasty, and now we are, just about 12 months a year of all fantasy football, Dynasty football, and
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love there is no off season. Sometimes I even prefer the off season to the regular season because the off season's all about theory and prospect evaluations and drafting and trades and stuff like that. And the season's when it all goes wrong. So I kind of sometimes I almost prefer the off season a little bit sometimes. And yeah, Dynasty just it really makes everything more fun. Like people they play their 16-week fantasy football redraft and then they turn off football and they never think about it until the next season. Then they miss out on rookies and teams that are changing, players that change teams, stuff like that. So I love Dynasty. It's really the only way to do fantasy football for me.
absolutely. I think you're right. The off season has been much better ever since I think you and I got involved with Dynasty. We're
Hmm.
talking, we're speculating, we're following every single small moves, we're consuming every single little news that come out. This guy got arrested for DOI. This guy is jacked up over the off season. It's like we're integrating and we're formulating who the
Yep.
best players are. And now, coming into the 2018 season, now we have another cycle of amazing stories of the offseason, of rookies coming in, of people, of players transferring to different teams, of teams having new coaching staff. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are about the global off season between the 2017-2018 season, and then let's talk about the draft a little. When your thoughts about it, because that happened a little bit about a month ago, actually. Wow, it's been 4 weeks already. So yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Basically, it wasn't too crazy of an offseason, I don't think. I mean, there was kind of the big quarterback changes that kind of went on. That was kind of what everybody was looking at. Where's Kirk, Kirk Cousins going to go? Alex Smith got traded. Keenum, what's going to happen with them? Sort of the Minnesota situation. And I think those are the kind of the big free agency hits. Sammy Watkins was probably the only major wide receiver there. And was kind of like, well, where's Sammy going to go? And now we have some other guys that are free agents that we're kind of waiting to see where they go. So overall, I thought it was kind of a quiet free agency. Looking at it from like the big picture, I don't think there were too many people that really like lost their job, at least at the top of where it really matters. Not too many shakeups there. So I think overall, I think it was kind of a quiet free agency, and then obviously the draft comes in and messes stuff up a little bit.
No, absolutely. Compared to previous few years,
Yeah.
definitely there were a lot more drama about contract issues and things like that. I'm sure you're also riding high on the Philadelphia victory, their first ever Super Bowl.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's no secret I'm an Eagles fan. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see lots of Eagles stuff, and I try not to do too much fan account, but when it's Super Bowl time, I think you get a little bit of leeway where you can kind of say whatever you want just because your team is the champions, and like you said, first time in 60 years or 59 years or whatever, right when they won the year before the league merged into what we know as the NFL today. So technically, they were the only champions or the last champions of whatever it was called before, but it's pretty amazing. I mean, I'm kind of an emotional guy, so I definitely, it was like a week of crying and being excited, and then I would watch like sound effects from the Super Bowl and cry again. And every time I see the Philly special, where Foles asked Peterson if he should do it or not, I always get emotional from that. But anyway, yeah, I've been riding high off that all off season.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I'm happy for you. I know I've been one of those doubters, the ones that got in the chat was like, oh, business as usual,
Yeah.
New England, they got this, they've done it before, they'll do it again. And then as the game progresses, I was like, whoa, this is really happening. We're talking about Nick Foles and a bunch of, ragtags that you got from Ajayi, who wasn't even on this roster
Right.
in the beginning of the year. And we got Alshon Jeffrey got his extension, so I'm sure the Eagles were much more happy with that. But we're thinking about Clement being involved. He was a big part of Trey Burton being involved. And it's just a great feeling for, I guess, the city and the fans itself. But so yeah, we'll have more time to gush over that. You have a few more months to celebrate being champions before Philly has to be defending that title starting in September again. So now jumping onto that, looking into the new chapter, looking in 2018. Tell us what is some of your thoughts on the rookie draft, and what are some of the analysis when it comes to dynasty football?
Yeah, so I thought it was a interesting draft. I mean, I think there are a lot of players that we were excited for that went to kind of not so good spots. I just think Saquon Barkley, obviously the 101. Everyone knows that. Everyone knew that. I think the Giants probably one of the better spots he could have went to. Their line's not great, but they're going to be in scoring positions. They have a good passing attack. I mean, he's going to score points on a lot of them, and that's obvious. Then it kind of starts to get a little messy. There's a couple the running backs. Everyone's looking at running backs. I think it's like in the first round there's like 9 or 10 running backs. In some rookie drafts where it's like everyone's hitting these running backs, which may be a bit of a function of last year where they went off crazy. Fournette and Cook and Kamara and all those guys went crazy. And this year the wide receiver landing spots have been really crappy. So and even then some of the running back spots are not great either. I mean, Nick Chubb and the Browns isn't great. They have Hyde still and
Duke Johnson.
Duke Johnson, not David, obviously. Darius Geis went super late, and Redskins is a decent spot, but what's going on there? And then you get guys like Rashad Penny, who are first round picks, but no one was really expecting that. So it really shook up. I do 2 drafts that are before the NFL draft, and being able to get Penny, in the second round or the late first, and then he gets taken in the first was kind of a crazy jump for him. And then we look at the wide receivers, and it's bad. I mean, I think DJ Moore may not be the best talented of all the wide receivers, but he probably went to one of the better spots. And then you look at guys like Calvin Ridley went to the Falcons. Okay, he's obviously immediately the wide receiver 2 there. Courtland Sutton goes to the Broncos. I mean, he may be, in terms of first year production, wide receiver 3 on the team right there. I mean, obviously these guys have future value, but I think their year 1 production is going to knock all these guys down. So it was kind of a shakeup at the top, really, where all these running backs are going, and the wide receivers, which are kind of the bread and butter for Dynasty, or in my opinion, they should be, kind of went to crappy spots. So it's interesting. I think I think it's going to be, some of the guys that went a little bit later in the draft and guys that are going later in your rookie draft that are going to kind of give you really good value. Guys like Anthony Miller, Dante Pettis, DJ Chark, Traquan Smith, where these guys really are going to be in second round, mid-second, late second wide receiver picks that are going to give you way more value. I mean, one of these guys is probably going to have a really good year and be set up really well going forward. So I think, the first is good. I wouldn't really be super excited to take some of these wide receivers, but there's a lot of value to be had in the draft all over the place, which I think is important. And then, if you're doing IDP, you get to sprinkle that in as well, and that makes it a little bit more exciting.
Yes, and absolutely. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. You're kind of sharing the same sentiment that I have and a lot of people have about this class. It's going to be running back heavy at the top, and then wide receiver is about who's who. We're hoping to hit that guy that surprises us all, like a Juju Smith, like a later round guy like Stephon Diggs, who was also drafted later in fantasy as well. And we're hoping at this point, we're not guaranteeing any of the top wide receivers that they'll be productive, that we can count on them from week to week, but they do have exciting futures going forward. Now, you mentioned IDP, and Adam, you are one of the main writers for DLF on the IDP content, and you also host a podcast that discusses IDP. So for our Dynasty Mind today, I do want to focus on helping our audience become better at Dynasty IDP, because this is the future. I believe that IDP is the future. People can try all different kinds of formats. If you only play half of the field, you're missing out on a wonderful aspect of fantasy that is now only possible because we have new technology that will calculate our scoring and tracking all the different types of players around here. Tell us, what is your preferred IDP scoring, and do you have an ideal for the global kind of format? So do you think that there should be a mainstream type of IDP scoring, or is there better to have every league have their own kind of ways to score? Because IDP didn't born out of something like how we know fantasy football. There was a standard set of scoring, and we followed that until we introduced PPR later on. But IDP just came out either you're big play heavy or you're tackle heavy. Tell us a little bit about your sense of what you think would be helpful for the IDP community to grow.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just real fast, I mean, your point on you're only playing half the field is a perfect way to get people into IDP, because they're focusing on 11 and not even 11. I mean, like 6 of the 40 guys on the field. You're not talking offensive linemen, and I think that's a little ridiculous. That we're only focused on a couple skill positions. So yeah, you should try IDP. I think if you do it right from the start, you really enjoy it. I think a lot of people try it, and it's really like leagues where you start one linebacker, one defensive end, one safety or whatever. Those aren't fun. I mean, there's no value to be had there. So to transition that a little bit, first thing I'm going to talk about is what we like to call, it's called the MPLB scoring because it was the MPLB league that kind of started the scoring. It was made by Breeze IDP and H-Bomb IDP, Tyler Huggins, and Eric Breeze. And Breeze does the IDP designations for RotoWorld, which is the ones that MFL uses. So if you have a problem with the designation, you should go talk to Breeze about it, and he'll tell you why you're wrong. But why we call it that? And you said it. It's before IDP leagues are either big play heavy, which is like sacks, interceptions, score a lot of points, or tackle heavy, where tackles score the most points. And what MPLB tries to do is do 2 things: balances out all IDP scoring and makes it so offense and defense are sort of almost interchangeable. I don't say they're completely interchangeable, because obviously a quarterback should be scoring higher than the LB2 on a team, that sort of thing. So they're about even. So the way MPLB does it in terms of lineup is it's usually 11 offensive players and 11 defensive players that you're starting, which, if you know anything about football, is a full lineup, not without having the offensive lineman in there. That's kind of the way I like to do it. I think personally, if you're going to do 11 on offense, you probably should do 13 defense, which breaks a lot of people's brain a little bit because they want everything to be symmetrical. And just because of the way that IDP is, and we can talk about this more, it's very deep. When you're talking about skill positions, you're going to have one running back on the field, two wide receivers, a tight end, and a quarterback. But on the defensive side of the ball, you're talking about, okay, a defensive tackle that are startable, defensive ends that are startable, maybe two linebackers on some teams that are startable, and then usually a safety that's startable. So there's a lot more guys, which means that more people are scoring points, which means that if you want to make it balanced, you're going to want to include all those people. So in MPLB, usually we do 3 to 4 defensive linemen, 3 to 4 linebackers, 3 to 4 corners or safeties. Some leagues are going to split out defensive tackles and cornerbacks and make them required. And I go back and forth on this all the time. Usually when you split them out, you're giving them a little more value because they're more important, because there's scarcity involved. There's only so many good defensive tackles, which means if you have a good one, he has value. So what MPLB tries to do is combine high lineups and high scoring to make IDP matter. So that's sort of the lineup situation. I don't want to just go long-winded, but basically, if you look at sort of the overall scoring with MPLB, I don't need to go into how many points is a tackle and yada yada yada. Usually, a tackle in MPLB is 2 points, so that kind of gives you a kind of a view there. And then a sack is 3 points for every half sack. So a single sack is 6 points. Now that sounds like a lot because you're talking about a touchdown for a skill position, but a sack is huge. A sack is a down, you get it down, and you move the ball back a little bit, and it makes it harder to score first down. So that's that's a huge thing to get a sack. So it deserves to be scored properly. So I'll go over sort of the overall offensive after I let Chris speak for a second because I'm kind of going on and on. But so we take the scoring and then we have the lineup. That's huge. We have really high scoring, and then we do tiered scoring. And tiered scoring means that you have your base scoring, and then you kind of get a little bit of bonuses to the positions that don't score so well. So defensive tackles is a really good way to explain this. So defensive tackles don't get a lot of sacks, and if you get a tackle as a defensive tackle, that means you just pretty much stuff the running back or you chase somebody down. You deserve good points for that. So the tiered scoring is going to give a little bit of a boost to defensive tackles for their tackles. It's going to give a little bit of a boost to defensive ends. It's going to give a little bit of a boost to cornerbacks that are getting like passes defended, because that's really what we want to score. So tiered scoring is important, and high scoring is important. And what it ends up doing is actually making IDP really matter a lot. And it's not just like we don't want to make it too ridiculous, but at the same time we want to make it so you're really comparing, like, do I trade like Luke Kuechly for Alshon Jeffrey or something like that, where it's like a good wide receiver for one of the best linebackers, and otherwise, because of the depth of the positions, because of you can LB30 and LB12 really aren't that different. You want to make it so guys have a lot of value. And I'll let Chris talk before I go into sort of like what that ends up looking like in terms of overall scoring.
I think you brought up a lot of fantastic points, and it starts off with having a good foundation, because once people have adopted a lot of the scoring that was just arbitrarily set up, tackle for 1 point, where they don't take into consideration what each position, the scarcity or the productiveness that they can put up statistic-wise anyways, because that's all the points we get from is statistics. And you bring in a great point that people often start off with a wrong foot with IDP because they try to balance the roster lineup out. They try to fit the scoring to what they know traditionally. But NBLP or NP, no players left behind, that league I am familiar with. B brought it up last time too, and I'm happy that you're bringing it up, because it sounds like this is the scoring that will help people have a more fair way of looking at IDP, have a better way of valuing IDP versus offensive player. And I will post the link in this YouTube video in the description section, so people can read over the rules again and while following your train of thoughts, because it is important that we don't treat all defensive linemen the same. Some defensive tackles are better than others, and there's a very, very small group of defensive tackles that you can count on consistently, just much like how you can count on a tight end consistently year to year. There's only a very, very handful of tight ends that you can do so now we're beginning to see we mirror the value, we mirror the scoring, and it will help facilitate trades. Now I know there's a lot to be talked about, and I really wish we can go on forever talking about IDP, because it's really a fun format to have. But you bring up a point that segues well into my next question for you, is there's a constant things that I see happening when people try to offer IDP players to people like you, writers, analysts. They think that, oh, you guys are IDP heads, so we're going to offer you JJ Watt for your Todd Gurley, or we're going to offer you some random defensive lineman because they scored well these past 3 weeks for your best wide receiver. Tell us how do you go about respectfully declining and while also teaching them that's not how I value IDP, and it'll also be an education, a teaching moment per se.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I mean, there's still work to be done to find the best scoring, and the problem is a tackle isn't an official stat. There's no guide. A catch is a catch. You know, a 6-yard run is a 6-yard run. There's no official stats that the NFL recognizes for a tackle. So until we get there, and until we kind of can do cornerback scoring a little bit better, I think IDP has a ways to go. But MPLB is a really good way to check it out. And there's other scorings out there that are really good also. So whatever your league decides the best. But to answer your question, yeah, so it does happen a lot, and especially in leagues where people are inexperienced with IDP, they look at the year to date and they see that, I mean, who's a good example of this? Sean Lee scored 205 points and he was the 47th overall player or whatever. And they say, well, okay, that's a lot. I mean, I don't know him, whatever. So I'm gonna try to trade him. And the thing is, like, you got to look at each player, respective of not what they did last year, which I think is a good dynasty, tip anyway. Is always look for the future and not focus on what they did last year. So when people kind of offer me, a high name IDP player, especially for an offensive player, I'm of the thinking that always offense, always hit offense, because offensive players are a lot harder to get. And when you're talking, it's tough because I want to say it's easy to find a linebacker late, because normally it is. I mean, you're going to be able to get a guy off the waiver wire. Last year, Zach Vigil or whatever, who's going to be able to be a starter for you, at least in deeper IDP if you're starting 4 linebackers. So I'm not one to ever really pay up for, especially a linebacker. I think maybe it's defensive end. It's a little bit different just because of, like you mentioned, scarcity of the position. So because I know that I can get a linebacker later, I'm really never, ever going to pay up for a linebacker. And I don't blame anyone that is the same way, just because you can get guys later. But at the same time, if you're not as comfortable finding those stud, linebackers or useful linebackers later, I think it's okay to maybe trade a little bit of your offense for IDP if you're not as comfortable with it, especially if you're really good at drafting offensive players. So you kind of go to your strengths. But I think for the most part, I'm never really going to pay up for I'm never going to use offense to buy IDP players, unless it's sort of like a throw-in, and I'll do that a lot. If there's a guy that I like that's no one really knows about. I mean, this year it would probably be like Frank Ginda, or like Dylan Cole is a good example in Houston, who's kind of super under the radar. So people think that I'm just like adding, a 4th round value when it's someone I really want. I'm just not going to always offense for me. It's always offense, because the offenses are a lot harder to come by. They're a lot harder to find. You're not going to find an Alshon Jeffrey on the waiver wire. I mean, it's just not going to happen, especially in deep dynasty leagues. So my advice to pare it down a little bit is always offense, and then kind of use the draft to get IDP, scour the waiver wire. Tom Kissingberry, my co-host, puts out a really good article every week about snap counts, and you had B on, and he does a really good article on waiver wire pickups. And like, these guys come from nowhere. I mean, like last year, Ramon Humber was like a top scoring linebacker for every week that he played. And it's just like, you can find these guys. And I think that trading for IDP sometimes works out, but usually I want to focus on offense and kind of use the waiver and stuff like that to get IDP.
Absolutely. And that's a fantastic way to just looking at it and become better. Definitely we have a better sense of the offense, but when we can get better thinking about defense, I think we can find a balanced way of just constructing a team and finding the values on the waiver wire, like you mentioned, because IDP is deep, and it's important to know your league format, how many starting linebackers you need, starting defensive line, starting defensive back. So let me transition then to talking about rookies. We'll have some a little bit of rookie talk. What do you think the strength of the rookie class is from an IDP perspective coming into the year, and did that play out after the draft?
Yeah, so it's no secret. I mean, this year was a really bad defensive line class. And then the safety class had like not really many people at the top, but was actually pretty deep overall and for a from an NFL perspective. And that leaves linebacker. And this year, I think is one of the. I think we're going to look back on this year and see that this was one of the best linebacker classes. And why do I say that? I think because there's two guys at the top, Roquan Smith and Tremaine Edmonds, who are really, really good players who went to really good spots. And I think both can be really long-term studs at the position. And I don't think usually there's maybe one guy who's like far and away the best. I think it was Reuben Foster last year. But because there's two guys at the top, and then even the next tier, Leighton Vander Esch, Rashawn Evans, and Darius Leonard are also really good players in good spots. So I think from a strength perspective, the linebacker class is far and away is just blows the rest of them out of the water. I mean, I don't think there's even besides Marcus Davenport, there's really not a defensive end that I really want. That I'm like going to be like, I really need to get this guy. And then from a safety perspective, it's Derwin James and maybe Terrell Edmonds and a bunch of guys that are hopefuls / stashes. So if I walk out of the draft, my rookie draft, and I was able to get one of those linebackers I mentioned, and that's it. Except for really late. I mean, depends how late your rookie draft is. I'd be okay with that. Some of these guys are one or two of these later linebackers, one or two of these defensive backs, and some of these defensive linemen are going to have, going to get a really good value boost because that's how it always is. But it's going to be interesting to figure out which one those are.
Yeah, it's kind of how you describe some of the wide receivers that we're anticipating wide receiver rookies because we know someone will hit. We just can't figure it out who. So at the end of the day, we just have to do our best, do our homework, and putting together the talent and their opportunities that may arise. So, in thinking about the strength of IDP, I like to kind of focus on a particular group. And today, I would like to talk to you about safeties. What are some of your thoughts about the 2018 NFL season when it comes to the safety? Overall, and then we're going to talk about some of the rookie safeties that stood out to you that you might want to stash or pay attention to.
Yeah, so safety is an interesting position, and I guess I'll give it like a sort of an overview of like why. Most teams play two safeties, right? And one guy is a free safety, and one guy's a strong safety. And what does that mean? The free safety stands behind everybody else, and he's sort of like the last guy. You don't want to get past the last guy, and he's also the help for a corner. And, if you're playing zone, he's the guy in the back that is going to take the guy who's going farthest, basically. So what does that mean for IDP? Well, normally the free safeties aren't going to get tackles because they're usually really far away from the football. And they're usually covering someone who's like running all the way down the field to kind of open up the middle of the field. So generally free safeties are guys we don't really want in IDP. And, there are always exceptions. Some people just have a nose for the football, and then obviously schemes change. Some guys, I mean, I'll take Miami as an example. Rashad Jones, TJ McDonald, and they drafted Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's three safeties. And what we've heard and what they did last year is they rotate their guys. So sometimes Rashad Jones is a strong safety. Sometimes TJ McDonald's a free safety, and they kind of rotate. So Rashad Jones obviously still has value. So what does the strong safety does? The strong safety is going to move up in the formation, and he's gonna be a lot closer to the line of scrimmage. Usually these guys are hard hitters. They're good at staying clean. They don't usually get blocked often because the offensive linemen are going to block defensive linemen, linebackers. The wide receivers are going to be blocking corners, and then you have the free safety who's all the way in the back. So the strong safety is kind of usually a little bit clean getting to the football, and these are the guys that we really want in IDP. So, guys, obviously, Landon Collins is probably. I mean, he had surgery, but I think he's far and away number one. He's in the scheme. He's the quintessential strong safety. He has a nose for football. He's a big hitter. Personally, I like Keanu Neal after him. Usually this is the way it goes. And he's again quintessential strong safety. I mean, if he's out there on in the back of the field, not running up trying to kill somebody, you're using him wrong, because what he's best at is hitting someone to make them remember. And safety is just it's an interesting position because it's very it's very shallow at the top, and then it's sort of really murky in the middle, and then afterwards, like guys, we hope are going to be hope maybe get some tackles, free safety, stuff like that. So guys, I have at the top. I'll just bring up my ranks real fast. We're talking Landon Collins, Callanier, Harrison Smith, Vikings, Rashad Jones. It'll be interesting to see how they rotate there. I still like Carl Joseph. Morgan Burdett went to the Steelers, so he was kind of a top guy before he went to the Steelers, and now he's kind of fallen a little bit. And that brings me, Josh Jones or Clinton Dix. Clinton Dix are going to be one of those guys is going to be a strong safety. So those guys are looking at. And then after that, it's really like not good. I mean, we're looking at older players that kind of rotate. Guys we're not really sure what's going to happen. So I could just give like a couple guys that I like going into this year. I really like Von Bell now that Kenny Vaccaro is gone, and Marcus Williams, famous Marcus Williams, is a quintessential free safety. So I like Von Bell. I like Budda Baker. I think he's an interesting position. Whichever guy, it's interesting because another reason we don't really know what's going to happen in a lot of teams. We can talk about Derwin James and the Chargers. Well, me and Tom really like Jaleel Addae, and now we're not really sure where they're going to use Derwin, where they're going to use Addae. Neither really free safety, so it's interesting. And that's the same way in Indianapolis, kind of the same way for the 49ers. It's just like we don't really know exactly what's going to happen. We're hoping, but we're not NFL coaches. We're not the coach of those teams, so it's a little bit sketchy. But whichever guy wins the job there, you have to keep watching in training camp and stuff like that. Are going to be big guys. And I mean, I only named like, how many was that, like 10, 12 people? I mean, and there's 32 teams. So it's definitely a deep position. I think teams are getting to the point where they're rotating more often. So it's a position to watch. It's a position to keep an eye on, but it's a little up in the air right now. And there's always going to be guys that kind of climb out of nowhere just because the strong safety spot is a producer. And it's a good one to watch for your waivers.
Awesome. And safety has always been a position that I definitely enjoy watching, but now I get to play as part of my IDP teams. I've known names such as Ed Reed or Sean Taylor, Troy Polamalu, all those guys. They're fantastic to watch. And you brought up a long, just the top part of your list, and it bears a lot to paying attention to. Do you find value into paying attention to camp stories or preseason games that will give you a sense of who might be getting the strong safety role, or do you continue to wait until into the season after maybe 2 or 3 weeks that will give you a solid idea of who is going to play what role?
Yeah, I mean, preseason's the best. Training camp's okay, just because normally in training camp you'll get a lot of rotation, but you do get to see who's running with the quote-unquote ones. But it's a little different for the defense side of the ball than it is for offense. I mean, offense has like first team, but because of the way defense is, where they have different schemes, I mean, in your base scheme, you probably have 2 safeties on the field. But when you start to get into like nickel, when you take a linebacker off and you bring in another defensive back, sometimes that is a safety or a safety designated player that comes on the field, or something like that. So it gets a little confusing when you're looking at training camp. I think preseason is really where you get the most clear view of who's going to play where, because we get like 4 games to see. Minka Fitzpatrick was the free safety, which I don't know why you would do that, but he's the free safety for 3 of the games. Okay, well that's locked in basically. So that's sort of where I try to look the most. And I guess in terms of like getting value is projecting these guys. I mean, trying to figure out who profiles where, getting a little bit of OTA, tidbits here and there, and trying to project who's going to be where and take your shots based on that.
Awesome. Thank you for all that information. I've been playing IDP for 8 years, and I'm still learning new things. It's a dynamic game because even for IDP, things are changing, and we're bears paying attention to. And I, for one, am glad that we have you, Tom, B, Breeze, Mike Woolett, everyone out there, Joe, talking about IDP and keeping us up to the trend, because this is not a static game. They don't always fit in the nice little box that we want them to. It keeps evolving, and I'm very thankful for having you on today to kind of teach us how to look into that safeties. My last question to you, and then we'll close out. How can people get better at IDP? What is one advice you can give people who might have been trying it but have not been able to find success?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess there's two things. I mean, I would say if you want to try it out, go in full force. Like find a league that's starting, a good amount of defensive players. I mean, it doesn't have to be 11-11. It could be 9-9 or whatever, has good scoring and really values IDP. I think a lot of people like just dip their toe in and then they're like, "Oh, I don't like it," because it's not as deep as they want. They're not as valuable as they think that it could be. Like I said before, if you're starting one linebacker, I mean, there are some teams have two linebackers that have value. I mean, so there's like 60 guys that could fit in 12 spots. I mean, so you really got to jump in. So that's my advice if you want to try it out. Ways to get better. People say I don't watch tape. I don't know how to watch tape. I don't know how to do this. You just turn the tape on and watch it. And when you don't need to know exactly what's going on, but guys that are good are going to pop off the tape. I mean, go back and watch Keanu Neal in college. I mean, he is constantly flying into frame and blowing people up, and it doesn't always transfer. I mean, there are guys who do that, and like Sean Elliott or one of those guys now and stuff like that. But usually it does, and I think just by watching the football, see what the defense is doing, and I think you'll get a sense just because being a football fan, I think it makes it a little bit easier. So do that. Follow, people, combine people's ranks, learn about schemes. I think a lot of people know football, know offensive schemes, but they don't really care about the defensive side of the ball. And I think learning, what's a 4-3, what's a 3-4, what's nickel, dime, those sort of things can really help you understand IDP a lot better. And just try it. I mean, I think a lot of people are scared, and then most of the people I talk to that really go full force or that I force into it, some of my friends, they end up really liking it because it adds a whole nother side of the game to fantasy football. I mean, you're literally adding another, 600 players or whatever to think about, to talk about, to trade, stuff like that. And it just adds so much more fun to the game. For, even if you're not a degenerate like most of us are, I think it adds a lot of fun. So definitely try it out.
Absolutely. I can definitely vouch for that. That's been my experience. The league that we're in, the good and the bad league, that IDP format, that's how I started. And I had to think about salary allocation, I had to think about trade values, and it really just challenged me to grow as a Dynasty owner, to grow as a fantasy football player. And it really does even translate some of the benefits to a regular league, because now I know this player might not be performing as well because the other opposing team's defense is that much better. Thank you again so much, Adam. Tell us where people can find your work. What do you have upcoming for us in store? The off season is fastly coming to an end, and we are about to see some real football soon.
Yeah, so you follow me on Twitter. It's at AdamTZ. You can subscribe to the DLF Read and React IDP podcast, where me and a guy from Britain, surprisingly, break down IDP only. That's really all we talk about. And definitely check that out. It's on all your Podkicker, iTunes, all that stuff, SoundCloud. And then I've got a couple articles coming out doing some draft winners and losers from the draft for the NFC East and the AFC East. So my two realms. I live in Florida, and I'm an Eagles fan, so I got both of the Easts right in my wheelhouse. So I got those articles coming out hopefully soon on DLF, and check them out. And Chris, thank you so much for having me, man. This was awesome. Absolutely.
Thank you so much again. And guys, you can find my work on YouTube. Just search for Dynasty Mind. There are 30. This will be episode 34. So I'm getting up there. I'm really excited about all these new things that I can share with people. You can find my work at fakepigskin.com. Support our writers there as well. And we will catch you on the next episode of A Dynasty Mind.